Next up, I've got Cole Anthony of the Orlando Magic. I've been very high on Cole ever since his rookie year for his potential as a really exciting scoring guard in the league. And during his sophomore season a couple years back, we kind of saw that at the start of the year at least. There was a time where he was averaging 20 points a night. And ultimately that Markelle Fultz came back in the lineup, and Cole's production suffered a lot. His minutes dropped. And ultimately, it didn't end up being a super complete season for him. And the biggest knock on him at that time was just that his efficiency wasn't there. Because if you're going to be this offensive-minded guy who isn't the best defender, if you're an offensive scoring point guard, you need to be efficient while you're doing it, or otherwise you're a net negative on the court. And over the past couple of years, and especially this past year, Cole Anthony's efficiency has improved, which I think is probably the biggest key to unlocking his full potential because, you see high volume scorers. A high volume scorer who isn't very efficient is a very, very replaceable archetype in this league. You see it especially with scoring wings, right? Zach LaVine, those kinds of guys aren't valued too high despite their individual talent. But if you are able to be more efficient, then you're able to impact winning basketball, even if most of what you bring to the game is just your scoring. Because a guy like Zach LaVine, or Cam Thomas, I think, is a really good example. Cam hasn't been particularly efficient, and all he brings to the team is his scoring. So if he's not doing that efficiently, he's not being that positive in terms of offensive contributions. But Cole Anthony, he's become more efficient in the past couple of years, so I think that is really huge in overall impact on the game, and that's going to lead to more minutes and more trust from the coach, and it's just great all around for Cole Anthony. One other thing that I think can really unlock his potential is the loss of Markelle Fultz, because the Magic, they had a lot of guards on the roster, a lot of talented guards on the roster. Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, and they drafted some too in the previous draft. And so it's hard to find room for every single person on there, and who's going to start every night, who's going to come off the bench. So now that Markelle's out of town, you can kind of have more solidified roster spots. You can say, hey, we're going to put Cole Anthony at the 1, Jalen Suggs at the 2, Franz at the 3, Paolo at power forward, and Wendell Carter at center. And that's a pretty good lineup, and you don't have to worry about where you slot in Markelle there, because Cole Anthony, he was kind of getting put on the bench to go get buckets for the second unit because his skill set is more acquainted to that, as opposed to Markelle was a better fit for the starting lineup in terms of his playmaking, for sure. Next to guys like Paolo Banchero, you want to set him up. But Cole Anthony has also become more of a solid playmaker in terms of limiting his turnovers. And just as time goes on, he develops more experience and becomes a better player and a more solid overall player. So I think now at this point where you don't have to worry about Markelle Fultz and where you have a more efficient Cole Anthony, it's really a prime season for him to break out, especially when you've got a guy like Paolo Banchero or Franz that is going to be able to take away defensive attention from him. Defense is going to key in on the newly found all-star Paolo Banchero, or a guy who a lot of teams, a really, really solid forward next to Paolo and Franz Wagner, teams are going to key in on that when they're on defense, and it leaves a lot more space open for Cole Anthony, especially with Paolo's drives to the basket. So I think that overall, Cole Anthony is in prime position to break out this year. If you enjoyed this video, it would be great if you could find it in you to like, subscribe, maybe check out the full podcast on Spotify, follow us on there, follow us on Instagram. I know realistically this podcast isn't going to go anywhere ultimately, whether it's via the segments on YouTube or the entire podcast itself, but I want to get into the sports broadcasting business. I want to be able to promote thought-provoking discussions about the NBA, and I would love to do it via State of the Association. Thank you if you made it all the way through.